Welcome to London. We begin our visit in the centre of London, at Buckingham Palace, the London home of the royal family, where tourists come from all over the world to watch the changing of the guard. Every day, a new guard of 30 guardsmen marches to the palace and takes the place of the old guard. The Tower of London is one of the oldest buildings in London. It was built more than 900 years ago to guard the bridge that led into the city. Many kings lived here until the 17th century, when it became a prison. Beefeaters guard the tower and guide visitors. Their clothes are those of the Royal Guards of the year 1500. Next to the tower is Tower Bridge, one of many bridges that cross the River Thames. The middle of the bridge can open to allow big ships to go through, up the river. London used to be a busy port with ships from all over the world. Here, in St. Catherine's Dock, there were ships carrying wool, tea, spices, tobacco, rubber, sugar, coffee. But today, most of the big ships stay outside London near the sea, at the mouth of the River Thames. Today, in St. Catherine's Dock, there are only historic ships and pleasure boats. Down the river is Greenwich, and beside the Royal Naval College is the Cutty Sark. 100 years ago, this ship used to bring tea from China. Further down the river is the Thames Barrier. This was built to stop the river flooding London. When the tide is very high, the gates are raised from the bottom of the river and the floodwaters are held back. Up the river again we come to the City of London. The tallest building is a bank. This is the commercial centre of London. Hundreds of banks and companies have their head offices here. And in the centre is St. Paul's Cathedral. It was built 300 years ago by Sir Christopher Wren after the Great Fire of London in 1666. And in 1981, it was here that Prince Charles and Princess Diana were married. Westminster, the Houses of Parliament, and Westminster Abbey. Inside the Houses of Parliament are the House of Commons, with 650 members of Parliament, and the House of Lords. Above the Houses of Parliament, the most famous clock in the world, with its huge bell, Big Ben. London attracts over 9 million tourists every year, who come to see the sights of London like Westminster and hear the Horse Guards on Whitehall. Trafalgar Square. It was built to remember the Battle of Trafalgar, which was fought by Lord Nelson. Here you can visit London's biggest art museum, the National Gallery, or simply feed the pigeons. London streets are always busy with people shopping. There are many large department stores like Selfridges and the world-famous Harrods. London is a city of parks. St. James's Park between Buckingham Palace and Westminster. Kensington Gardens with the Albert Memorial, and opposite, the Royal Albert Hall, London's largest concert hall. The parks of London are a place where Londoners and visitors can escape from the noise of the city streets. London Zoo is in Regent's Park. It has a large collection of birds and animals from all over the world. South of the River Thames, at Kew, are the Royal Botanical Gardens. In the palm house, there is almost every known variety of palm tree. From Kew, take the Underground to Covent Garden. This is Covent Garden in the 1960s, when there was a big fruit and vegetable market. But the market became too crowded, and in 1974, it was moved to another part of London. Today, the buildings are the same. But there are cafes, and small shops, and open-air stalls. Many of the stalls sell handmade things. Covent Garden is also well known for its street entertainment. These men are Morris dancers. But street entertainment is not the only kind of entertainment that Covent Garden offers. If you like opera, go to the Royal Opera House. There are also several theatres in Covent Garden. From Covent Garden, it is a few minutes' walk to the lights of Piccadilly and the West End. This is another area that has many theatres, cinemas, and restaurants. Pubs are also an important part of London's social life. As Samuel Johnson said, when a man is tired of London, he is tired of life. Within the shores of Britain is to be found a land of great variety, from the rocky coast at Land's End to the rich farmland of Kent. The high mountains of Wales. The flatlands of East Anglia. The moors of Yorkshire. With a population of about 60 million, Britain is one of the world's most crowded countries. Who are the British? Like many nations, we are a mixture of different peoples. Many of us are descendants of the various invaders who have settled in Britain. Early invaders were the Celts, around 500 BC. Many of their descendants live in Wales. In some parts of Wales, 3 out of 4 people still speak Welsh, a Celtic language.
Right boys, gan ni gadw'r canu yn reit acenog fan hyn rwan, a gan ni ganu'r nodau yma wedi pererindod bywyd, reit acenog, okay, reit rhythmig, a canu'r dy, llythyran dy efo'i gilydd. Iawn baritons, wedi, an. Wedi pererindod bywyd, ni lawr yn haf, ro'r pwysgaw a chanu'n hafryd,
In 55 BC, Julius Caesar landed near Dover with his Roman army. But it was only 100 years later that the Romans managed to conquer England and build settlements and forts. The Romans stayed 400 years. Hadrian's Wall, which runs across the north of England, marks the northern border of the Roman colony. The wall was built in 101 AD to keep the Scots out of England. Other invaders came, Saxons and Vikings. And in 1066 came the final invasion, this time from France, by William of Normandy. After a bad start, William fell as he came ashore. The Normans soon gained control of England, and William became King of England. The Normans wanted to conquer the whole of Britain, but Scotland resisted. In Wales, they built many castles. This is Kidwelly Castle. And this is Manorbier Castle. The Welsh fought back from their own castles, but finally, in 1282, they submitted to English rule under Edward I. To ensure his victory, Edward built huge castles like Harlech Castle, Conwy Castle. Edward's castles were so big and strong that they were famous throughout Europe. The biggest of all was Carnarvon Castle. It took 37 years to build. In 1301, Edward I made his son Prince of Wales. Almost 700 years later, in 1969, Queen Elizabeth made her son Charles Prince of Wales in the same ceremony.
I, Charles, Prince of Wales, do become your liege man of life and limb, and of earthly worship. And faith and truth I will bear unto thee, to live and die against all manner of folks.
The Normans were great cathedral builders. Durham Cathedral was built in 1093, less than 30 years after the Norman invasion. Further south, in the rich farmlands of Lincolnshire, William the Conqueror ordered the building of a cathedral in the ancient Roman town of Lincoln. The Cathedral of York. York is an ancient walled town. Like Lincoln, it was important in Roman times, and the Vikings settled here. Canterbury Cathedral is the mother of the Church of England. For centuries, thousands of pilgrims travelled long distances to visit the shrine of Thomas Becket, the archbishop who was murdered at this spot in the cathedral in 1174 by order of his king, Henry II. In recent times, a pope and an archbishop have knelt here together in prayer. The cathedral steps are still worn by the knees of pilgrims who crawl to pray at Becket's shrine. The pilgrims stopped coming when Henry VIII quarrelled with the Pope, destroyed monasteries, and had the shrine itself pulled down. Henry VIII is also remembered for his 6 wives and his cruel behaviour to them. His first wife, Catherine of Aragon, lived here in Leeds Castle. Anne Boleyn, his second wife, lived in Hever Castle. She lost her head, but it is her husband who is remembered today in the pub at Hever. In 1564, less than 20 years after the death of Henry VIII, William Shakespeare was born at Stratford-upon-Avon. The Royal Shakespeare Company perform his plays throughout the year in their Stratford Theatre by the river. Not far from Stratford is the city of Oxford, home of England's oldest university. The university was established in 1214. Today, it is made up of 35 colleges. They share common university facilities, major libraries, science laboratories, and so on. Cambridge University was founded a few years after Oxford, when a group of Oxford students quarrelled with the town authorities and had to leave Oxford. They fled to Cambridge. One of the best ways of seeing many of the colleges is from a punt on the River Cam, which flows through Cambridge. Wherever you travel in Britain, you will find reminders of the past. Chester, for example, was an important Roman city. Its medieval walls follow the plan of the Roman walls. The name Chester comes from a Latin word meaning camp. Many of these shops were built during the reign of Henry VIII. Bath was also an important Roman town. The Romans built these baths. Today, people still come to Bath to bathe in the medicinal waters. Brighton's prosperity as a bathing place also starts in history. It used to be a poor fishing town. But in the middle of the 18th century, a Dr. Russell told his patients that sea bathing and the sea air was good for them. People started to call the town Dr. Brighton. When George IV built his royal pavilion, Brighton soon became England's best-known seaside resort. To cross the seas to visit the island of Britain is to visit a land of variety, history, and of great beauty.
This is your captain speaking. We will shortly be landing at Edinburgh Airport. Please fasten your seatbelts and extinguish your cigarettes.
Edinburgh, capital of Scotland. The Scots are proud of their fine capital, dominated by the castle. This is where the kings and queens of Scotland lived until 1603, when Scotland united with England and Wales to become one country. Today, Scotland is part of Great Britain, but the Scots still feel that they are different from the English. This film will show you why. Glenfinnan. Scots today remember the year 1745. In 1745, the King of England and Scotland was King George II of the House of Hanover. Many Scots wanted a Scottish king of the Stuart family on the throne of Britain. Charles Stuart, or Bonnie Prince Charlie as he was called, came here to gather an army to fight the English. There are many romantic stories about him, and King George offered a reward worth about £1 million in today's money, but no one betrayed Prince Charles.
Charles, Prince of Wales, to be the sole regent of our kingdoms of England, Scotland and Ireland, and of all other dominions.
Charles and his army advanced into England, but they were pushed back into Scotland. In 1746, he fought King George's army at Culloden in the north of Scotland, but he lost. The short revolt was over. Selkirk in the south of Scotland. Here, every year, there is the common riding. People ride along the border between Scotland and England to show they are independent of England. A young man takes the common riding flag. Other riders join him as they ride in the streets along the border. They are demonstrating how they are independent and different from England. Mountains cover much of central and northern Scotland. This area is called the Highlands. Lakes in Scotland are called lochs. The most famous of all Scottish lochs is probably Loch Ness, the home of the Loch Ness Monster. Is the monster really here? No one knows. Ruined castles remind us of the many battles fought between the Scots and the English, or between Scots and Scots. For in the past, Scottish families, or clans, often fought with each other. The total population of Scotland is only 5 million. In the Highlands, most people live near the coast or beside a loch. The climate of the west coast of Scotland is surprisingly warm. This is because of the warm Gulf Stream in the sea. Inverlew, on the west coast, is famous for its semi-tropical garden, with plants not only from the cold Himalayas, but also from warmer regions in New Zealand and South America. The climate in the Central Highlands is much colder. Off the west coast, there are many islands. You can visit them by ferry. Some ferries are very small. They can take 5 or 6 cars. Others can take 40 or 50 cars. There are more than 700 islands off the west coast. Skye is one of the most famous islands. Most people in Skye are crofters or small farmers. This croft, or farmhouse, is about 150 years old. A peat fire burns inside. Peat is still used in the islands and highlands. Every summer it is cut out of the ground. Then it is dried for the winter. In the islands, a few people still speak Gaelic. Gaelic is a Celtic language, completely different from English. Iona is a very small island. In 563, St. Columba came here and built a church. He brought Christianity to Scotland. This church is in the same place as St. Columba's Church. 48 Scottish kings, 4 Irish, and 8 Norwegian kings are buried here. A boat takes you from Iona to Staffa. The great composer, Mendelssohn, visited this cave and wrote his famous overture, The Hebrides. Fishing is an important industry in the islands and on the west coast. And all over Scotland, you can see sheep. Scottish woolens are famous all over the world. But Scotland's most famous industry is, of course, whiskey. Whiskey is made from barley. The barley is first soaked in water. Then it is taken out of the water and left to germinate. Peat is used in the fires that dry the barley. In the room above the peat fires, the barley dries and stops germinating. The peat smoke comes through the floor. This is what gives whiskey some of its special taste. The smoke goes out through the chimney. At the south of Loch-Lomond is Cameron House. It has the world's largest collection of whiskey bottles. The Scots are proud of their tartans. There are more than 300 different tartans. Each tartan belongs to a different clan or family. The Scots are also proud of their traditional games. Every summer, at Highland Games, you can see games like throwing the hammer. This game is called tossing the caber. He is not trying to throw it as far as possible. He is holding the thin end of the caber, and he's trying to throw it so that the thick end falls near him along the line. the games, you can also see Scottish dancing. On the last day, bagpipers march through the streets. Scotland is a country with its own history and its own traditions. Scotland is different from England, and the Scots are proud of Scotland. The state opening of Parliament. The Queen and her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, are leaving Buckingham Palace for the House of Lords at Westminster, where the Queen will open the new session of Parliament. She will read the Speech from the Throne, which is a statement of the government's plans for the next parliamentary session. Britain is a constitutional monarchy. This means that the Queen is head of state, but she has very little power and plays no active part in politics. Her role is largely ceremonial. The Queen's official residence in London is Buckingham Palace. Originally a private house, it has been the home of kings and queens for over a century. The Royal Mews at Buckingham Palace. These are the ceremonial horses who pull the royal coaches. The gold state coach is the showpiece of the collection. It is used at coronations. The other coaches and carriages are kept in perfect working order for various ceremonies. Down to the smallest detail, including the harness, they must look perfect. Near Buckingham Palace, they are getting ready for trooping the colour. The Queen is the only person who has 2 birthdays every year. There is her real birthday, which she celebrates with her family, and her official birthday, in honor of which her own special soldiers, the Household Division, put on a big parade, trooping the colour. The colour is the flag of each regiment, and they troop or march with their flag past the Queen. tribute to Her Majesty. What other roles do the royal family have? All the members of the royal family play an important role in supporting charity. Princess Margaret, the Queen's younger sister, has come here to attend a gala charity party. Prince Philip, the Queen's husband, is very active as the president of the World Wildlife Fund. Princess Anne, his daughter, is president of the charity Save the Children. 30 miles from London is Windsor Castle. For Queen Elizabeth, this is home. Here she spent a lot of her childhood, and she spends many weekends here. St. George's Chapel was started by King Edward IV in 1475 and finished by Henry VIII almost 2 centuries later. Henry VIII is buried here, as is Charles I and other kings and queens of Britain. Queen Victoria spent a lot of time at Windsor with her family. At the railway station, lifelike wax figures illustrate the family's arrival from London. Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace are 2 of the 3 official palaces. The 3rd palace is in Edinburgh, the Palace of Holyrood House. This is where the Queen stays whenever she is on business in Scotland. It was the home of Scottish kings for many centuries. Mary, Queen of Scots, lived here in the 16th century. The palace was enlarged and improved in the 17th century by Charles II. The Queen is very fond of Scotland. She has called her 2 older children, Charles and Anne, for her Scottish ancestors, the Stuarts. And her 3rd child has the most Scottish name of all, Andrew. Every summer, the royal family visit Balmoral Castle in the north of Scotland. This is their holiday home. Here they can relax. They can go walking or fishing. They can go riding and have picnics in the hills and woods around. They can get away from it all. The castle was a present from Prince Albert to his wife, Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria loved it and stayed as long as she could each summer. She and other members of the royal family used to enjoy travelling to Scotland by train, a comfortable journey in carriages like these. The royal coat of arms on the front of the train made sure that everyone knew that royalty was on the train. Indeed, some trains were named after members of the royal family. These royal trains of the steam age can be seen in the Railway Museum in York. In the east of England is the royal station of Wolferton, now a museum. The station was made as luxurious as possible for the royal passengers. 100 years ago, the royal family used to travel from London to their country home of Sandringham by train. Sandringham was bought by Queen Victoria in 1861 for her eldest son, Edward. She thought he spent too much time at parties and theatres in London, and that in the country he would lead a quieter life. But instead, his friends came to see him at Sandringham, and they had their parties there. Queen Elizabeth's father, George VI, called Sandringham the place where I can forget for a little while that I am a king. And his father, George V, loved it too. I have a house in London, he used to say, but a home in the country. Some people think that the monarchy is too expensive and that it should be abolished. But there is no doubt that Prince Charles and Princess Diana have helped to make it very popular again. Like the Queen, they play an important ceremonial role. And like the Queen, they travel widely, giving glamour to Britain's image and helping her trade and political relations all over the world.